In honor of 1000 Year Blood Wars anime release, I figured I would do a video on some of my favorite things in Bleach, starting with my favorite panel. There are many cool options in regards to panels, but I would have to go with this one. For me, this panel encapsulates all that is Ichigo Kurosaki, and as Bleach fans know, the background behind this moment is what makes it so great. It is no secret that Ichigo's main goal is to protect all those that are dear to him, and I feel no other panel speaks more to his character than this notorious one. This panel appeared in the 1000 Year Blood War, but to fully understand its significance, let's go back to the Soul Society arc. In this arc, Ichigo and his friends had the task of saving Rukia from her execution. Before this arc started, Rukia was taken away and Ichigo was promptly carved up with ease by Byakuya, Rukia's brother, who left Ichigo crushed without powers. Ichigo and his friends would train rigorously after Rukia was taken. They would enter the Soul Society as Ryoka, intruders, to rescue Rukia. In their rescue mission, they would come across many obstacles: mad monks of violence, lost stray dogs, terrifying proponents of science, the polite ones who advocate with the shadows, and deadly demon incarnates. But throughout all these beings, all these obstacles, it was no secret that Ichigo's main adversary, his main battle, would be against the one who sliced him up and left him for dead, the one who gracefully slaughters Byakuya Kuchiki. Ichigo would raise the grounds of the Soul Society if it meant to protect his friends/family, and he would find himself facing the brother of the friend who saved his life. His friend Rukia had helped Ichigo save his family, and now, to save her, he would have to fight her family, her adopted brother Byakuya. The brother, a proud noble, was in conflict with his pride, his promises, his duty, but that would not stop him from engaging in a bloody battle with the erratically growing Ichigo. After some help from perhaps his greatest ally, Ichigo would prevail and circumstances would lead for Ichigo to ally with the Soul Society, his once enemies. Over the years, great amounts of mutual respect would emerge between Ichigo and Byakuya. In the Fullbringer Arc, Byakuya faced everyone's favorite character, friend, father, mother, spouse, Tsukishima. Tsukishima's powers allows him to insert himself into the past of others, and he would use it on Byakuya to become a close friend who saved his life. Despite Tsukishima becoming an incredibly important person in Byakuya's past, Byakuya would still go on to slay Tsukishima. His reasoning for it was that, no matter how close they were, he was still Ichigo's enemy, and an enemy of Ichigo was an enemy of his, meaning that Tsukishima had to be taken out, regardless of how highly Byakuya looked up to him. This really showed us how close the two were. Byakuya would slay the person who saved his own life over his once enemy Ichigo Kurosaki. After being bitter enemies in the past, they eventually made it on the list of each other's most trusted allies. Let's discuss a bit more about Byakuya before we go forward. Byakuya is what you would expect nobility to be in Bleach. He is proud, stoic, and carries himself with such grace fitting of a noble. He was raised to be an exceptional nobleman, someone with integrity, strength, and valor. But most of all, he took pride in it, with his pride perhaps being his most notable characteristic. As any proud person with a high sense of self, it would pain Byakuya to ask others for help, to be seen as vulnerable. And all of this is important when it comes to my favorite panel. In the 1000 Year Blood War arc, we finally arrive at my favorite panel in Bleach. The Stern Ritter had invaded the Soul Society, sort of like how Ichigo once did, but this was on a whole different level. The Quincy obtained the power to steal the captain's ace in a hole, their most dangerous weapon, their Bankai. This gave them incredible power, and tilted the odds in their favor after stealing and employing the Soul Reaper's greatest weapon. We saw this firsthand in Byakuya's battle, with the epitome of fear in S-Note. The one who gracefully slaughters had lost his signature blades for execution, and the terrifying Quincy used it against him. This was a bleak and despair-ridden time for the Soul Society, and this battle was the one that contributed to it the most at the time, with this being before Yama's defeat. What S-Note did to Byakuya, how he carved Byakuya up with his own weapon, was brutal, appalling, and heart-wrenching. We saw something we never would have imagined happen to one of the most proud, skilled, and beloved Soul Reapers. As the entrails of Byakuya were pasted on the walls, as if he was in a Shinigami slaughterhouse, as he was breathing with what looked like his last breaths, it felt like his final wishes would come true. in a moment when it felt like the impossible was needed to survive this war. The one man who constantly shattered what was thought to be impossible had arrived in the Soul Society. Ichigo had shown up in Byakuya's most trying time. The one man who Byakuya knew would have the best chance of saving everyone had finally made his entrance. When catastrophe was plaguing the Soul Society and its residents, Ichigo was not there to protect them. As you can imagine, this was a tough moment for Ichigo, and the rain shows exactly that, with it representing Ichigo being overcome with despair. I'll be making a separate video talking about the rain in Bleach soon. Just as things seemed like they're at the lowest point, Ichigo would confront Byakuya. In a time of desperation, Byakuya would let out the words that resonate with Ichigo the most. As the past has shown, it was always the Kuchiki that gave Ichigo the strength to overcome his inner darkness. It was always Rukia, but this time, in what seemed like his last moments, it would be Byakuya. The words that gave Ichigo unimaginable strength were, "Protect the Soul Society, Ichigo Kurosaki." Save the Soul Society, Ichigo Kurosaki. Now, Ichigo has been called upon to save/protect before, but all the circumstances here is what made this moment my favorite. What made this so beautiful was that Byakuya did not have to say that. He knew, Ichigo knew, and everyone else knew that Ichigo would stop at nothing to protect his friends, his allies. But regardless of that, Byakuya still brushed aside his pride and mentioned it, acknowledging Ichigo in the process, something that the proud nobleman rarely does. Byakuya must have known the impact it would have had on Ichigo. He knew it was perhaps his last words, and they were fitting last words. With these words, Byakuya would pass on his duty as a captain, as a noble, to protect the Soul Society in all the realms to the man who does it the best, his once enemy turned friend, Ichigo Kurosaki. With the rain, with the despair creeping in, Byakuya needed to say these words to bring out the best in Ichigo. He must have known his once enemy more than most. You learn a lot about a man once you engage in a battle to the death with him, and those words must have lit a fire under Ichigo that was unparalleled. A fire so strong that it would have caused a drought in Ichigo's inner world, despite there being a constant downpour of torrential rain. In the harshest of storms, you must protect the fire deep inside and ensure it doesn't stop burning. Byakuya's words were simple, but they were enough to spark a flame that carried Ichigo forward. How would you feel in this situation? I'm sure it was tough for Byakuya to say that, as the proud captain never asks anyone for help, but at this moment, those words must have brought him more joy and relief considering his state, as well as the state of the Soul Society. In a way, this moment was Byakuya telling us that there truly are more important things than pride. As for Ichigo, I'm sure nothing else in that time got him more pumped up, got him more thirsty for violence than seeing Byakuya being torn apart and pleading to him with his last breaths, especially when he did not have to. Unfortunately for Ichigo, he still got whooped after, but that's not what this video is about, so let's forget that happened. Regardless of the outcome, it was one of the coolest moments in Bleach, and it never fails to bring me chills. This panel signified a full 180 for Ichigo's stance on the Soul Society. The same place where Ichigo risked his life to infiltrate, seek, and destroy is now the place where he will have to protect with his life. On top of that, this was the task given to him by the person he once wanted to defeat the first time around, Byakuya Kuchiki. After getting destroyed by his own Bankai, this really felt as if it was Byakuya's goodbye, as if he was asking Ichigo to do what he failed to accomplish in protecting the Soul Society. If this was Byakuya's final goodbye, then this would have made this an even more heart-wrenching moment, as many, myself included, thought this was the end for Byakuya. Again, I want you all to imagine what Ichigo felt at this moment. Imagine the chills that ran through his spine when Byakuya was at his last breath, asking him to do what he failed in doing. Imagine the relief Byakuya felt to see the exact man he wanted to see just as his world was being engulfed in blood and chaos. The man who can single-handedly bring forth miracles. After seeing Ichigo struggle for so long, after rescuing his friends one after another, Ichigo had become the shining ray of light in a dark and bloody world. And this panel shows us exactly that. Ichigo, the man who struggled with despair his whole life, had become the antidote to despair for others. This panel brings me chills every time, because if you need somebody to protect someone, something, anything, Ichigo is your man. He is the #1 protector. It's what he does best, and this panel is calling upon him to do what he was made to do, in the world's most trying of times, protect. And I feel no other panel better demonstrates that.
頼む。ソウルソサイティを守ってくれ。黒崎一護。